Pittsburgh do this all the time. I've been playing them for 13 years. When you avoid the middle, they go into the middle. It's never changed.
And welcome back to the Steel City Sermon. I am your host, Mr. Roy Countryman, at Preacher Boy Roy. Thank you guys for sticking it out with me there. I'm just having some technical difficulties. You gotta love how internet usage in rural areas are, and too many tabs being open. So I apologize for that, and thanks for sticking with me as I was getting it situated here. And definitely glad to be back with you guys this Saturday afternoon. Getting ready to preview this Steeler matchup and give you some thoughts on last week's matchup. So let's go ahead and jump right into it here. This is the 14th episode of the Steel City Sermon, and we're going to go ahead and talk about that win against the Eagles. It was a little uneasy because they still were making a drive to come back and be in that game late last week, but somehow we're one of only 4 teams still to be, especially in only 2 in the AFC conference, to be undefeated at this point with us and the Tennessee Titans. I didn't think if you're a waging man that if you'd be thinking we and the Titans would be the only undefeated teams in the AFC. I think a lot of people would think Kansas City was. But unfortunately, they lost to the Las Vegas Raiders last week. So interesting to see our trajectory of our season continually go forward here. And the win against the Eagles was key because we're coming into about a 3-4 week stretch here that we're going to be going against the teeth of the schedule. We're really going to be getting some vaunted opponents. The best challenge so far of the season will be the Cleveland Browns. And we'll get into that, highlighting that matchup here a little bit later. But on the Eagles matchup, I'd be remiss if I don't open it off with the number 1 prospect Encyclopedia player of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Chase Claypool. This guy, it's awesome to see his game just evolving each and every week. He's one of the hardest workers on the team. By all accounts, he's there early, there late, always there by Ben's side. Also with the other young receivers like James Washington and Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster. All 4 of those guys are very, selfless players and cheer each other on. It was really nice to hear that Big Ben, out of all the celebrations last week with Chase Claypool and his explosive game, was none other than Juju Smith-Schuster and how happy he was. It's kind of a breath of fresh air after the AB era here and wanting the ball. You have a guy like Juju, it's just genuinely happy that he's on a winning team. So I'm really going to be pounding that table for them to be re-signing him at the end of the year. And I think we're going to see it happen, as we kind of talked last week with the interview at CBS headquarters, dropping it there that he is more worried about re-signing with the Steelers than he is money per se. And they'll take care of him. Especially young players like that. Those are the players the Steelers front office always target. So let's get off that topic. Let's get back to the Eagles. Chase Claypool, he's not the only receiver, though, that put up an immense performance last week. A big tip of the cap to none other than Kevin Dotson, who had to come in off the bench due to David DeCastro suffering another injury here. He had a knee injury earlier this year. Now he has an abdominal injury. I'm wondering if it isn't a lower core injury, maybe a sports hernia injury that may drag on here for a little bit. But this guy, every time he sees the field, he just makes explosive blocks. He's a people mover, folks. And I can't see how he wasn't invited to the Combine. He's just an absolute freak at a guard position. He doesn't look like a rookie at this point. Him and Chuksa Okorafor on that right side really, really buoyed the performance of the whole entire offensive line, who I got to give a tip of the cap to, because that was the number 1 ranked pass rushing defense in the NFL, and we held them to 1 sack. So even with David DeCastro, who by all accounts is a Pro Bowler and All-Pro player, even with him missing, and then Marquise Pouncey late in the 4th quarter having to step away due to a foot injury, we didn't miss a heartbeat with a lot of these guys, and that really speaks to the depth. And even a big tip of the cap to Sean Surratt, who kind of took some heat last year after Mike Munchak left. He has all these guys prepared to play, even if they're not a starter. So we actually have a lot of depth, a lot of upside going forward here for the offensive line. And we're going to need it because we have some guys getting a little long in the tooth, and it's going to be interesting to see down the road next year the decisions and what the alignment's going to look like. But as far as this year, Kevin Dotson, that's a home run pick so far. Him and Chase Claypool, and it's just been dynamic with them two players already. Then you have Alex Highsmith playing key snaps. Really, Kevin Colbert, you did a great job. Anthony McFarland, he's just scratching the surface, finding his role in this offense. It's going to be interesting going forward. Another player I want to throw out there, Ray McLeod. It's awesome to see him not only as a kick returner here, folks. We're starting to see him being deployed in all this motion and gimmickry that's being in our play action and on end arounds and everything like that. It's really cool to see the creativity starting to come around with Matt Canada in addition to Randy Fiechner's offense. So he actually led the team in rushing with I believe it was 63 yards, 63 yards, and he broke out a big 58-yard run. So that was really nice because outside of that, the one concerning area, and it might have been just because the offensive line, the upheaval with DeCastro going out and then late with Pouncey, is they did not run the ball well outside of those motion runs with Ray McLeod. All three of their key running backs, James Conner, who's by all accounts their bell cow, Benny Snell, and also McFarland, who looks to be getting more carries every and each week. They all average less than 3 yards a carry. I believe James Conner ended up only with like 44 yards on 15 carries. They all run to 3 yards per carry. That's not going to cut it when it comes to playoff time. We're going to definitely need to find a bell cow. I'm not convinced still it's James Conner. He just looks like he's the third most explosive back in that trio right there. I'd actually like to see more of Benny Snell after that 100-yard appearance earlier, but I know due to his fumbles, he's kind of been taking a back seat somewhat. But Anthony McFarland, I said before on my predictions that Conner might lead the team in yardage, but he will not be the bell cow by the end of the year. It'll be Anthony McFarland. So I cannot wait to see him continually grow. We might see it this week with the Cleveland Browns missing a couple linebackers and whatnot. So definitely some concern right there, but a good highlight to Ray McLeod and what he was able to do. Rush defense yet again. Tyson Alu, Hayward, Tuitt, Vince Williams is a man-child. He still leads the league in tackles for loss, especially with his run defense. Bud Dupree, T.J. Watt, Devin Bush, even Terrell Edmonds has been really solid this year in tackling. Outside that long 74-yard run by Miles Sanders for the touchdown, we still held him under 100 yards. And even that play, if Mike Hilton would have been able to square up a little bit more, he wouldn't have been breaking that long run. We all know the aggressiveness of Mike Hilton and the way he flies down and around. It does lead to a broken tackle here or there, so I'll give him that one. But you can see they ratcheted up the intensity the rest of the game. They were not going to let it happen for the rest of the duration, so that's nice to see. We're still the number one ranked rush defense in all the NFL. Awesome to see if we can shut down one facet of an offense and put pressure on the quarterback to win the games. Pass defense, I know this has been talked about a lot around, and for good merits, because it's uneasy feelings. Steven Nelson did have 2 interceptions. Good on you for making your appearances there when the ball come to you. But by all accounts, you and Joe Hayden both were very uneven performance. Joe Hayden, more than anything, you can see his savviness as a veteran. He did man up late in the game and come up with a key pass defense when we needed it to shut down a third down attempt there. And I'm really more comfortable with Joe Hayden just because he's savvy. He knows, even though he might not have the best long speed, he knows to put himself in a good position. Steven Nelson's regression, though, is really concerning and alarming to me. We'll talk a little bit more about him in the next portion here, the sermon session of this. But I'm really starting to maybe wonder if we're going to see them maybe face some of these new guys like Justin Lane, who by all accounts as a gunner has been outstanding and has that length and the outside corner build that maybe we'll see him phase him in more. But Steven Nelson, I'm concerned about you. I know the stats on the stat sheet will say, oh, he had a good game, he had 2 interceptions. I'm not so convinced. If the eye test is telling me you're more uneven than so. So run support, you're still there, but you're just not playing with the swagger and confidence you did last year. And by all accounts, last year you were up there with Stephon Gilmore in completion percentage and the way you were shutting down players. And I know we're not doing no favors to our secondary because the amount of times that we're actually pass rushing and blitzing guys out of all different conglomerations, I know that's putting them on an island. But I still don't leave no excuse. You still got to step up and take your guy. And even some of the schematics, we're playing a lot more off. We're playing too much cushion. I want to see our guys, even if they're not playing press man, let's get up like 2 steps off of them and let's be aggressive throughout the duration of the route rather than playing so far off. I think that's what a lot with Travis Fulgham last week was able to take advantage. Really have some miscommunication errors inside. We're still growing with Devin Bush as our communicator, not Vince Williams and other guys. He is the key communicator now. Minkah Fitzpatrick, we need you to step up and make some game-changing plays. I know that you haven't had a lot of opportunities, but we're going to need you here in the coming weeks. So the defense as well, though, I do got to give them a little credit. Those same guys I was saying about the communication errors with the receivers did an excellent job shutting down Zach Ertz. And Zach Ertz hasn't looked the same dynamic tight end as he has in previous years this year. He just really does not look like he has the explosiveness and the movement ability. I don't know if injuries caught up with him or whatnot, but we totally shut him down last week, and that's one of Wentz's go-to targets. So big tip of the cap to those guys, Mike Hilton, Cam Sutton, Terrell Edmonds, Devin Bush, that were matched up different times with him. Great job to them guys, and we haven't really been being attacked with the tight ends down the seam, and we're going to need that going forward in the Cleveland game this week with Austin Hooper and Harrison Bryant, who's an athletic pass catcher from Florida Atlantic, that we really got to keep an eye on. So those are some guys I want to tip the cap to because they're doing a good job in that aspect. We also did a good job at continually putting pressure on the quarterback with 5 sacks. I believe we're up to 20 now again. Just ridiculous pass rush, but like I mentioned before, is it coming at the detriment of our pass defense? We'll see. You can't have everything. I'd rather have the sack totals and the victories than maybe the turnover numbers, and I think we're going to eventually see them both kind of level themselves out here. I think you're going to see maybe a matchup or two where we don't blitz as much and we sit back and play some coverage. But as far as this game against a very beat-up Eagles offensive line, it was good to see him bring down Carson Wentz 5 times. The other good thing I want to mention here is Big Ben. We know Chase Claypool had the 4 touchdowns, and he was catching balls all over the field, and it's great to see that type of athleticism just oozing out of a young player, especially with Big Ben loving big targets like that with Plexico Burress in his past and everything, Martavis Bryant. It was excellent to see the mental part of Big Ben's game take over. That last touchdown to Claypool where he identified and changed the play to take advantage of the mismatch that he had. If we keep seeing that Big Ben, oh man, we're gonna be, those numbers are gonna be outstanding by the end of the season. So great to see him exploiting matchups that he knows and able to just manipulate the offense to where he can take advantage of them. My final thing I want to talk about the Eagle game, and this is just my little bugaboo. Danny Smith, your special teams units have been playing very good this year. I'll give you a lot of credit for that, but we need you to stop being bullheaded. Because now Deontay Johnson's out again. He seems like one of the players that's always nagging with an injury, and we're just giving him more opportunities to get blown up by gunners and people running down the field on punt returns. I know he's an all-pro, Pro Bowl punt returner, but we simply cannot take that type of dynamic weapon out of our offense. It's time to be starting to phase him out now. You have an explosive player like Ray McCloud who has punt return experience. Also, another guy in practice, by all accounts, has been really flashing as a punt returner, Anthony McFarland. If we can't get him a lot of rush attempts, let's put him back here even. Let between McLeod and McFarland, unless McFarland starts taking some of the bell cow carries, let them two fight it out for the punt return duties. But right now, we need Deontay on the offense, and now he's going to be out this game against Cleveland due to a back injury, and we just can't have this continually happen. He's too big of a valuable asset for our offense. and we need him off of that special team return unit, unless it's a situation where you're down maybe in a playoff game and you want to spark. Maybe you throw him out there, but for the duration of the rest of the season, 18, I want to see you lined up outside in the offense, not back on a punt return. I know it's going to come back and bite me because you're going to wind up taking one back to the house, but I want you on offense making plays. Next up here on our prelude portion of the Steel City sermon is Le'Veon Bell. We have to talk about it. That was the whole story this past week. He did get released by the Adam Gase-led New York Jets. Terrible organization, the way they've been run. Won't throw that on Joe Douglas because he's new to the situation. But Adam Gase, I'm sorry. I always tell my friends around here, you're just like Joe Flacco, who, seems to be on the New York Jets. You should be sending a portion of your paycheck to the guy that helps keep getting you jobs. Joe Flacco, that was Anquan Bolden that helped you get that. Adam Gase, that's Peyton Manning. He's the one that keeps vouching for you, but Adam Gase, you are a terrible head coach, and I'm sorry. That situation, it speaks volumes when you look at the amount of players in the last few years that have left your building and the way they blossomed in the other place. Robbie Anderson, just for example, for one. And there's going to be more of them come out throughout the duration. Le'Veon Bell, I understand what you did. You went and got your money bag. That's what you were all about. You never were cancer so much as a player per se. You never had that. It was all business with Pittsburgh. It was heartbreaking to see the end. And I was really of the effect after watching this last game, and you see the rushing attempts and not much production. I thought for sure Pittsburgh would maybe pick up that phone and entertain those thoughts of saying, come on back, Juice, let's see what happens. You're at least a better option than Jalen Samuels as our fourth running back, and give him a chance to take over this backfield for at least 1 year. Your long-term plans would be James Conner's the backup then for this season, and Snell and McFarland could have been your 3-4. But it just simply didn't happen. I think maybe some of it was didn't want to upset the personalities of the way the work has been done and being produced by these young players. You don't want to upset that balance by bringing in a guy mid-season after they put in all the hard work in this kind of broken up off-season. I do understand that, Tomlin not wanting to upset the ratio of players that have put in the work from the beginning. But the rushing attack does have me somewhat concerned. We just don't have no stability there. Le'Veon Bell would have been a great addition in that aspect. But it just didn't happen. And one other thing, and he never gets talked about a lot, he's one of the best pass-protecting backs in the NFL. I think the creativity in this offense would have been just a little bit better, having him in the backfield and being able to mix and match. But it wasn't meant to be. But I did tweet out a few times about Juice coming back to Pittsburgh. But he wound up showing back up in Kansas City here. Great, outstanding fit for you. Patrick Mahomes, he's going to be peppering at him. And the two back looks that they're going to be able to produce with Andy Reid at the helm, and then having Tyreek Hill and McCole Hardman and a lot of them other guys, Travis Kelce. AFC just got a little bit more tough because he is not washed up. National media, you need to pay attention to this. He is not washed up. Le'Veon Bell is a high-quality player. He always has taken care of himself. We all know how it is to work in a bad situation, in a bad environment. You take up the mantle of what you're around. You just put in the work and say, I'm just going to do as much as what I can in the aspects I get. But Kansas City's a different environment, and Patrick Mahomes just got one of the best all-around backs in the NFL, in addition to the upcoming weapon of CEH and Clyde Edwards-Helaire there. So, yikes, AFC. That was a fit. It was between Kansas City, and I didn't want to see him in Kansas City or New England because both of those would just been scary. I would have loved him back here, but Kansas City, you got yourself a weapon, and he's not going to be the same player that you've seen in New York. I think he's going to be one of the stories of the rest of the NFL season here. So I just had to throw it out there. Le'Veon Bell was one of my guys. When he came out in the draft time, I loved him. I remember talking to one of my bosses at work who's a draft fanatic, and he loved Eddie Lacy. And I said, you got to watch this guy Le'Veon Bell from Michigan State. And he's like, I don't know. I said, he's like, you would take him over Eddie Lacy? I'm like, yeah, we'll talk 3 years from then. And he was putting up ridiculous numbers back then when I was scouting him. So Le'Veon Bell, for as bad as it ended here in Pittsburgh, you're still going to have a fan here watching in Kansas City with Mahomes and you. So best of luck to you there. He's not washed up, Pittsburgh. It'll be fun. We might get to see him in a playoff atmosphere here, maybe come back to Pittsburgh if we had a 1 or 2 seed, if Kansas City somehow doesn't get into those. So last thing here with the prelude portion as we move on past Le'Veon Bell is a huge congratulations to my man, Brett Kiesel, one of my favorite all-time Steelers. Fear the beard, loved him, his gregarious personality, great guy in the community. He was actually honored by the UPMC Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh, where they do outstanding work. I actually had to take one of my youngest son there after he was born due to some issues, but it's been worked itself out because of their tremendous work down there. But he actually was honored because he had a decade of donations with his Shear the Beard Foundation and fundraiser they used to put on, where he had an event where he would have a charity auction and stuff going on at the same time as they were shaving his beard with a lot of former players and whatnot like that. It was always a huge event in Pittsburgh. And he actually helped raise over $1 million for the actual hospital. So outstanding work, Brett. Love what you do in the community. Love everything that you're about, the fun-loving spirit that you bring both to Pittsburgh and their fans. You were always one of the first people to be signing autographs and taking time with kids in training camp. That's definitely appreciated. And you actually get in one of the halls in the UPMC Children's Hospital a mural of the 2-time champ. So big congratulations to you, Brett. Awesome work. Keep doing the good work and what you have after your football career. And anytime you'd like to come and talk on here, I'd love to have you on there. Like I said, you were one of my favorite players of all time. So had to throw that out there to my man Brett Kiesel. When I seen it, he got a mural on the Children's Hospital. I remember walking them halls and thinking about how cool it was and the environment that the Steelers players and the whole Rooney family and all the players there, the Steelers, they make it a priority to pepper that place with their presence. So Kiesel, you went above and beyond, and it's the Shear the Beer fundraiser has ended. Last year it was his 10th year, but I'm sure there's some more in store. You're not going to lose sight of that man coming down and doing his work there. So that's it for the prelude portion of this. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the meat and potatoes of this video series. The Steel City Sermon, as I said, episode 14. The sermon session. That's where we're portion of the middle portion here, and I want to see what your guys' thoughts of the NFL trade deadline. We're getting into the meat and potatoes of that 3 weeks from now. There's been a lot of rumors going around, and I just can't wait to see what's going to happen. And I don't know. There's some players, we already said Le'Veon Bell was out there. There's accounts that Quinn Williams is out there possibly. There's some other accounts that other players are still out there being dangled. This is really a progressive type movement in the trade deadline. In years previous, it was one of the things where it wasn't very active. The last few years, you've seen some more trades. You've seen some more creativity from the GMs. Kevin Colbert, has always been one of the more aggressive GMs. Whenever I can't wait to see what he has in store here, because I don't know if we have a over-the-top move that we're going to see go down, or if we're going to see maybe just a little bit of an addition here or there. So the way I took a look at this, like I said, it's 3 weeks from now. It's November 3rd is the actual trade deadline, the NFL. I took a two-phase approach. I looked at players on our roster that may be talked about with some other teams to maybe be bandied around for a return, where we have some excess maybe. And then I took a look where maybe we would be taking a foray or maybe a dip into some other teams that are maybe not off to the greatest start. Maybe you're in a transition point with a new head coach, or maybe are still rebuilding, and guys that are at the end of their contracts maybe not be resigned. So I kind of took a twofold kind of approach here. So I want to preface this by saying I've seen all the articles, and I'm just going to squash them out right now. Let's just be thankful we have Big Ben Roethlisberger and how healthy he's looked so far, how excellent he's looked, and by all accounts, he's, by the guys and the doctors that have been in there and the training staff said his arm has looked more fresh and invigorated than in previous seasons. Even Bill Cowher this past week came out and said that, He just sees him having a level of fun that he hasn't had in a few years, probably since when he first started, when he was first drafted with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I am not so sure we're not going to see Ben for more than what he is on contract for right now, which is, I believe, 2 more seasons. I actually think in this offseason where we know it's going to be, up in the air with what's going to happen with the salary cap, I think we're going to see another year or 2 tacked onto his deal because of how healthy he looks. And as long as he stays healthy throughout the rest of the year, I think we're going to see him be a fixture into his early 40s here with the NFL, because he just looks like he has a focus, even if he don't win this year, that we have a window still going forward with a lot of these players before their time is up, that he'll want to keep pushing through, a la late year and late career John Elway, who was one of his figures that he always looked up to when he was playing high school and college football. So I don't see Sam Darnold or Dwayne Haskins coming to Pittsburgh. The only way we're going to replace Mason Rudolph, who I'm not sold as the future quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, is a draft pick next year or the year after, where we have him for at least 4 years. I wouldn't be surprised if we're in that 30 to 32 range with our draft pick, if you see the Steelers don't trade up a pick or 2. If a quarterback falls, because you have that 5th-year option, I could see us targeting one in the first round if the right value falls, like Green Bay Packers did with Jordan Love. But it's not going to happen on a quarterback that's right now currently on a rookie contract, because we're still going to have to re-sign him while Big Ben is playing, or the transition is going to be happening in the last season of Big Ben, and it's not going to happen, folks. Big Ben is here until he says he's done. He's not leaving for another team. Pittsburgh is his home, and that's where he'll play, and I think we're going to be grateful for what he has. If we see players like Drew Brees and Tom Brady play in their late 40s, I think we're going to see Ben Roethlisberger, as long as he stays healthy, early 40s, that we're going to see him playing. So don't be surprised we see him more than what he's on contract for right now. So anybody that's throwing out a Sam Darnold and Dwayne Haskins trade, it ain't happening, folks. I'm sorry. It's not going to be there. So I don't mean to burst your bubble, and I don't mean to sound kind of sassy with you guys, but it's just not gonna be in fruition here. So back to the players on Steelers roster. What is one position where I've continually bandied about what's going to happen? The running back situation. James Conner. There's not really a running back out there I see that can come in and replace him, because of the running backs, the younger running backs on roster with McFarland and also Snell. I believe they're the future of the backfield. But Jalen Samuels is a guy that's a Swiss Army style. He hasn't gotten a lot of snaps with us right now. He could be a guy that maybe goes to a team that has a specific need for a third down back, that we can maybe get a late round pick for. So that's one player I kind of threw out there. Don't maybe a guy like the Chicago Bears that have a winning record right now. They have Nick Foles that loves peppering the ball to a running back. They lost out in the Le'Veon Bell sweepstakes. Tariq Cohen tore up his knee, so he is out. David Montgomery is a really good in-between the tackles runner, but they really need that pass-catching third down type back to replace Tariq Cohen. He's not the same type of explosive back. But I am convinced that would maybe be a team that you see a throw, and they've always been aggressive with their draft picks, going out and fortifying a position of need. So maybe Jalen Samuels to the Chicago Bears, or maybe even the Los Angeles Chargers. We've seen Austin Eckler go down with a terrible injury, most likely a season-ending injury. Joshua Kelly has been a really impressive rookie between the tackles. But they also, Justin Jackson's been in and out with some injuries. That might be another situation where they see a team that's still in the battle there in the AFC West, maybe for a playoff or a wild card spot, that needs a specific need because they have their in-between the tackle banger. Maybe they need a pass-catching back. So the Chargers and the Bears, maybe a late-round pick. It's probably not going to be a lot. Probably a 5th to a 7th round pick at that. Maybe a conditional based on playing time or performance. But that might be a player you can get back for a pick due to, since we lost one, we traded with Chris Wormley with Baltimore to get him. He hasn't played a lot of snaps, so maybe we go out and try to recoup a little bit of what we may have lost there. Another player that I was entirely high on coming into this year that's really kind of taken a back seat And I think a lot of it is due to Marcus Allen and the way he's transitioned from safety now to a thumping linebacker, a la Mark Barron. And I think he really impressed the coaching staff over top Ulysses Gilbert III. By all accounts, he had a great camp. He is an athletic specimen. He might be somebody that could be useful to a rebuilding team that's looking for some linebacker depth. Maybe they need a player to plug and play this year. And maybe, Atlanta, per se, they've lost some people like a Devondre Campbell. He is left in that situation for Arizona. Ulysses Gilbert could be a nice player there in a rebuilding type effort. We know they fired their GM, Thomas Dimitroff, and fired their coach, Dan Quinn. You're looking for future type stuff. Maybe you could do a player for him, which there's a player on their team I'd like to see. Maybe you could do a player for player swap. Or maybe it's just a late round pick or a conditional pick, just like I said with Samuel. So that's another player could be. Now this is the one I might take some heat for, and it's a guy I already called out, and that's Steven Nelson. We already know Joe Hayden is going to probably get another year or two tacked onto his extension after this year, because of his cap number being so high, just to lower that number. Steven Nelson will be a free agent after next year, so you have one more year of control with him. You might be able to bandy around. I know he has had an uneven year. He did have those 2 interceptions, but Steven Nelson, I'm not convinced that he's still going to be on the roster at the end of the year, or at least in the starting situation here, because he's just been so uneven, and that might be a hurt to his trade stock. But he might be one of them guys, he just needs a change of scenery. He might just need a new coach. He might need a new light of the flame. And there's another team I'd like to throw in here. It's actually a division rival that may bite on an opportunity to take him just due to that little bit of contract security for another year, because a lot of the other players there. By all accounts, Steven Nelson is a great worker, great work ethic, great player in the practice room and in the film room, getting everything in order, and he'd be a great leader for a lot of young teams. So I'm going to throw one at you here when we get to the players from the other side, along with Ulysses Gilbert. So there's a couple mock trades I'm going to throw at you, because really when you look at the Steelers, maybe some offensive line help. Secondary is possibly a need, whether it's a safety, just to come in and add to the talent that's there. I know we signed Sean Davis, but he's really been nothing more than a special teams contributor at this point. And we really need a cornerback that can come and play opposite of Joe Hayden. And if that's not going to be Steven Nelson, if our coaching staff isn't convinced, I'm saying let's be aggressive like we did with Minka and Devin Bush last year. You only have a certain window, like I said with Ben, maybe 3 to 5 if he's feeling healthy. But now let's get into the players from other teams we may feel interested in. The first one for me, and this one's a lot conditionally on Stefan Wisniewski. Stefan Wisniewski was activated, his practice window was activated. He has 21 days from his pec injury to be activated and added to the active roster. If the coaching staff and the medical people don't feel confident that he'll last the entire year, if it was a partially torn pec, or if he re-injures himself before the trade deadline, there is a player out in Seattle who left Pittsburgh and fell out of favor already with Pete Carroll, and that's B.J. Finney. I love B.J. Finney, especially with all these injury issues we've had. We've already seen, Marquise Pouncey went out at the end of this past game, David DeCastro. Luckily, we've had Kevin Dotson step up because Stefan Wisniewski was the first one to take his place. And that first game before he was injured with his pec, it was very uneven. I was not impressed with what he is. I think he's a better center than he is guard. So if we don't feel comfortable with that interior offensive line depth due to the continual injury problems, whether it's Wisniewski, if you're not comfortable with that pec injury, or DeCastro, if it's a sports hernia injury that he may have to get taken care of and be out for a while, because if Dotson keeps getting healthy playing time and producing, you might see them take an IR since he's able to on David DeCastro, being he's able to be activated after 3 weeks. Give him that time to heal up because we will need him in a playoff run. But B.J. Finney lost out in the center competition out in Seattle. They brought him in to win that position. He's just really not looked comfortable out there. We all know he loves this type offense and this schematic fit, especially with the offensive line coach. We've seen the reaction he had when he signed with the Steelers as an undrafted free agent. So if you could go to Seattle, if Wisniewski, you're not sold on him being 100% healthy the rest of the way, you can't have two guys on the interior with that much in question. So B.J. Finney's a guy to keep an eye on. Due to the, with all the outbreak and everything like that, the uncertainty, he already knows your playbook. You're not going to take a while to get him up to speed. He can automatically replace a J.C. Hassenauer, who's worked his way up into there, but I would feel way more comfortable with B.J. Finney being our backup center than I would Hassenauer. So B.J. Finney's a guy I'd keep an eye on in Seattle. He's kind of fell out of favor. He hasn't played a snap this year. He hasn't even played as a guard whenever they had Damian Lewis go out. They had another player take his place. They just have not been impressed with him after being a free agent priority signing basically by him. So Ethan Posick replaced him at center, and then after an injury at guard, he still didn't get a chance to play. And we know, he was one of the key and valuable assets in our interior offensive line, both as a center and guard. So that would kind of give you just a little bit more security along the way. And if it's a 7th-round pick or a conditional pick based on playing time, why would you not do it if we had the cap space? So B.J. Finney's the first one. Another guy, a former Steeler, and I'm going to throw this out there, and it's basically because the fact of Isaiah Buggs has been the one player being leaned on more than anybody outside of the top 3 guys with Alu and Hayward and Tuitt. But kind of like last season, we seen the snap count kind of come into play late in the year. Guys were getting winded with Watt and Dupree. You've seen the priority they placed on getting an Alex Highsmith and Ola Adeniyi snaps to where they're getting fresher legs by the end of the games or by the end of the year. If these guys, the 3 of the main guys, don't get more rotational snaps, Chris Wormley really hasn't done much since we acquired him. He's nothing more than what Dan McCullers was. He was the last guy off the bench in case they need him. Isaiah Buggs has been impressive in the few snaps he has, his 2-gapping ability and penetrating snap. But I'm going back to an old friend from Troy, undrafted free agent, and he has been a captain for the New York Jets defense, none other than nose tackle Steve McClendon. He has a very cap-friendly deal. It's only about $1 million and a quarter or so. So prorated, that's not going to be much on our cap. He's 34 years old. He'd probably love another chance at scooping a ring up with the Steelers. He was a key asset in the run defense of the Jets, and he was actually able to push the pocket a lot for them last year with Greg Williams. He has experience not only playing nose tackle, but also playing end, and that would be a outstanding add to this defensive front. The Jets aren't going nowhere. We already know Le'Veon Bell they released. Sam Darnold, they've been getting him butchered behind that line. They're already trying to get Mekhi Becton hurt after he was supposed to be out with a shoulder injury. They put him in because of another injury. Jets are a barn burner, so why not flip a late round pick for one of the guys they love in that locker room, who was an outstanding player for us for the Steelers, who left for more money as Le'Veon Bell did. Why not go flip a late round pick and add another dominant pass rusher and move ability, 2-gapping presence in that front if we face a vaunted Titans defense in the playoffs. So Steve McClendon's a guy I definitely would be interested in if I was the Steelers to add to that front. Be the 5th defensive lineman, let Wormley be the last absolute guy off the bench, maybe put him in front of Isaiah Buggs, and let Steve McClendon give all 3 of them guys a break, because he can play DN, he can rush the passer, and he can also give Tyson Alu a break and not let down a lot of production there. So Steve McClendon, B.J. Finney, those are the first 2 veteran players. They know the playbook. It wouldn't take them long to get up to speed. Now I'm going to jump into 3 other guys, and these ones took a little creativity. One guy was a player that the Steelers absolutely loved coming out of the draft. He was a surprise first-round pick. That was Keanu Neal from Florida. We brought him in for a pre-draft visit, and usually whenever you look at the pre-draft visits, those are the guys for 80% of the time, 70 to 80% of the time, they have a keen interest on, because they're not just going to waste the pick of that just to get to know a guy, unless it's a quarterback that might be playing in our division. So Keanu Neal was a guy they loved coming out of the draft. He has some injury history. We know he has an Achilles. He popped before. I believe he tore his knee up at 1 year. But he is a thumping safety. And if you could add him as a third safety with Terrell Edmonds, Minkah Fitzpatrick, guys that you can add a specific role to here, and he's on the last year of his rookie contract, no more guaranteed money left. He'd be a free agent after the year. But why not go and add that type of a presence who had some really good years before he was injured in Atlanta? Atlanta's rebuilding, folks. We know they fired everybody, as I talked before here with Ulysses Gilbert. Maybe you could do a player-for-player swap here and not lose out any picks. Let Atlanta maybe pick up some of his salary because he is on that fifth-year option. First-year player, it's a little expensive. Maybe you could do a player-for-player swap. They get a young linebacker in Ulysses Gilbert for Keanu Neal, a player that we could maybe use on our defense to come in that dime package and let Cam Sutton maybe play some corner and play some different positions and just have that creativity added here. So Keanu Neal's a guy, if you watch his highlight tape of laying people out, it is awesome too. So Keanu Neal at Atlanta, I said maybe Ulysses Gilbert for him, maybe a swap. That's a player kind of keep an eye on there. Two other guys now, and this is the first one I'll give. He's been very disgruntled with his role, and that's Cincinnati Bengals safety Sean Williams. He signed a pretty decent contract a few years ago. He was one of their stalwarts at strong safety. He's really enforcer type, a la Keanu Neal. A little older, a little longer in the tooth, but he has not been playing a lot of snaps whatsoever. They was actually talking in training camp to maybe playing as a linebacker per se. So it would maybe be an interesting veteran presence to add. Probably won't take a lot for Cincinnati to flip him because they're another team that's still building from a quarterback that's a rookie this year on a rookie contract deal. Maybe you can get him for a late round pick or maybe a swap of a player here. And it's an interesting fit too. So Sean Williams is another one. It would be another third safety type that could add to a different formation. Maybe you could put him in nickel packages and let him play, weak linebacker in a nickel 4-3 type look. Just trying to add some variety, like we have on our offense and the creativity we have. I want to keep adding that to the defense because we're going to need it if we face up. What you're ultimately building, Steeler Nation, is a team that we can face up with against the Kansas Cities, who now have Le'Veon Bell and all those weapons. That's the type of defense we need to be looking forward to because it's either going to be that or Baltimore Ravens. And you're going to need players that can stop the run and also match up with some tight ends that are able to go down the field. Titans are the same way. Run defense and also match up with tight ends. It's an interesting facet. If we're a playoff team, we really need to be playing really be scouting out players to be scheming up for those matchups come playoff time. The last player, and this one I would go down as, one of those headliner type deals, a la the Minkah Fitzpatrick, at least in my opinion. It was also a guy they were in love with and by all accounts was set to select in the draft that year. And with our uncertainty at cornerback, William Jackson III. He is on his last year of his rookie contract, fifth-year option. They absolutely loved him as a press man corner coming out of Houston. He's had some injury history here with Cincinnati with a shoulder injury and has been dinged here and there. But when he's been on the field, he has been dynamic. He's a number one cornerback that can shut down people. Maybe you take a little bit from the future and you give up maybe a second-round pick to get him, and you got to get him re-signed. We already know we have all these contracts to be signing players to anyway, but number one cornerbacks don't grow on trees. He's 27 years old. He's 6'1", 6'2", I believe. He's physical. He can match up with your number one wideouts. He'd allow Joe Hayden to slide into that number two corner, being that he's slowing down a little bit. And that veteran, you have your long lanky guy and your savvy guy on the other corner. I really love William Jackson. Cincinnati's not going anywhere. If you could get a trade there, and what I'm proposing is maybe you flip him a Steven Nelson, who maybe fits their schemage a little more. We've seen them already get rid of Dre Kirkpatrick, who is more the old type guard, the Marvin Lewis type cornerback that they look for. William Jackson's more that tall, lanky guy. Darius Phillips was playing some more. They've been kind of targeting smaller guys that are more quickness in between in and out of routes than they are big, long, and lanky guys. So maybe they like Steven Nelson. Maybe they add him to that equation in Cincinnati. He has another year on his contract. Maybe they feel better about extending him at a lower price than paying William Jackson. And we pick up a guy that we really coveted in the draft process. So William Jackson, maybe for Steven Nelson and maybe a third or a fourth, just to kind of really make a headliner deal to slide in there in our secondary and give us a guy to really have shutdown capability against the number one receiver. That's my biggest ticket on this trade deadline preview. And it's really not that big of a stretch because last year a deal, rebuilding team. You kind of see the only person on this list that isn't a rebuilding team is B.J. Finney from Seattle, and it's because he's just fallen out of favor. So these are all players you might see dealt at the deadline. It might not be the Steelers, but the Steelers should definitely be targeting them over like a Le'Veon Bell that I wanted to happen. But William Jackson, if we see him in black and gold, woo, buddy, Steeler Nation, it's gonna get nice. It's gonna get nice and stocked up in this kitchen out here in Pittsburgh. So I do want to get to a question here. I see my cousin Jay Hostetler posted a question here on YouTube on the comment section. It says, if James Conner leaves next year, will the Steelers draft a running back? Jay, they will probably draft one, but it won't be in the first 2 days. It'll probably be more of a depth type pick. I think they really spent that pick on Anthony McFarland and Benny Snell and his evolution, what they have. I think those two guys you're going to see going forward be the future of the running back backfield. They'll probably be targeting a guy to have a specific role. It might be an athletic specimen. It might be a guy you see a waiver claim or maybe even a practice squad sniping that they were very high on from another team late in this year as well. But I'm not so sure that we see them draft one in the first 2 days of the draft next year. I think James Conner is gone. I don't think he'll be back in Pittsburgh because by all accounts he should get a nice deal. He is a nice rotational back as a power back, but he is not a bell cow back. So I think the Steelers are going to be going to the new wave type system of not having one guy get 80% of the carries. I think Tomlin's going to lean on guys maybe 60-40, McFarland, Snell, however that breaks down, 50-50, 55-45, but it's just not going to be one back system going forward. Also, Rob also posted a question here on the YouTube comment section. It says, any interest if the Jets move Darnold? I prefaced this. I don't know if you might have jumped on it late here, Rob, but I love Sam Darnold. When I scouted him, it was pre-Blitz. I was actually scouting for my boy Russ Landy and GM Jr. He made those jaw-dropping throws. In my scouting report, no problem, Rob. I ain't trying to call you out, buddy. But Sam Darnold, I would love him on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let me preface it by saying that. I would love him on the Pittsburgh Steelers. But contractually wise, I don't see how it would be feasible to do. One, because his contract will be up. It's almost like a Jimmy Garoppolo type situation with New England. You had a late franchise quarterback. It's still playing well. And are you going to kick him to the curb to what he's done for you over, say, the 18, 20-year career that he's had? Or are you going to go with a guy that the last time you've seen him was getting beaten up? And I already said Adam Gase systems get a lot of people beat up. They look a lot better when they're away from New York. But Sam Darnold, when I scouted him, made a lot of the jaw-dropping throws that reminded me of Brett Favre. And I'm not saying he's Brett Favre, but I have yet to see a quarterback maybe outside of Patrick Mahomes. I'm not saying he's Patrick Mahomes. Let me preface it by saying that. But whenever he was making throws at USC, his footwork was terrible, and he was still putting throws on the money. And we see his escapability at times with the Jets because he has no time whatsoever. He made a heck of a throw, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, where he scrambled. He broke 3 or 4 tackles and still delivered a ball out there to the right pylon for a touchdown. I'd love to have him in Pittsburgh. But I think by the time that Darnold would be our starter, he'd already be in his late 20s. I think we're better off waiting until either this year, get a first-round player if one drops to us late in the draft, late first round of the draft, with that fifth-year option, or next year is where you really see them taking a look at one of the top quarterbacks and be able to have that 5 years with the option of the first-round pick. I just don't see either Dwayne Haskins or Sam Darnold. I believe they would be interested in him, but if Ben's arm would have been giving him more trouble and we still see some injury history, I think they would have been super aggressive with him. I think you might have already seen that deal done. If Ben was still showing that rust and showing, maybe an incapability of coming back from that arm injury, but by all accounts and all the medical people, he's come back bigger and better and stronger, and he's already talked behind closed doors about possibly playing past his contract, and I don't see him leaving Pittsburgh for that. So great questions, guys. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Rob. Love to see Darnold, but I just don't see how they're going to do it with a lot of the other guys needing another contract unless you convince him that this is the best situation for him. It could be, where he's just so happy to get out of New York that we could get him for, a box of Cracker Jacks and just, keep eating our popcorn for the next decade for the next Steelers franchise quarterback here. So that's where I'm going with our trade deadline. I threw out some players for the Steelers to keep an eye on. Jalen Samuels, Ulysses Gilbert, Steven Nelson possibly. Players that we may be looking for from another team, just keep an eye on. B.J. Finney, our old friend. Also another old friend, Steve McClendon. Keanu Neal from the Atlanta Falcons. And then 2 Cincinnati Bengals. Sean Williams, the safety hybrid linebacker, and William Jackson III, who's the big ticket meal here that I could maybe see us going after because we loved him in the draft. So that was our sermon portion of the episode here. Now we're going to jump into our game previews. Week 6 here is already upon us. It's already weird because we should have been gearing up for a bye. I believe it's next week, but now we're in a stretch of some big time games. It's Cleveland and then Tennessee, but this week's opponent is the divisional rival Cleveland Browns. They come to town tomorrow at 1 o'clock at Heinz Field. Another home game for us. Jumping into the injury report here, the Steelers only have 2 players out. As I already mentioned, David DeCastro is out with that abdominal injury. It might be, I'm just speculating, but it might be a sports hernia type injury or something along that line. I hope not. That's a longer term injury than what we'd like. And Deontay Johnson, I believe they're just giving him another week of rest to that back injury. Kind of already spoke to it. We need to get him off punt returns. It's just another opportunity to get pegged, get injured. We need him in that offensive capabilities there with the other targets we have. So those are the only 2 players for the Steelers listed as out. Now it's the opposite case here for the Cleveland Browns. They have a laundry list of players. A lot of players that have significance on snap counts. Jacob Phillips, who is an LSU Tiger, one of their, I believe it was 3rd or 4th round pick this year. He was actually the LSU leader in tackles last year over Patrick Queen, who's having a NFL Rookie of the Year type first half here for the Baltimore Ravens. But Jacob Phillips has really been an impressive player. He's out with a knee injury this week, so that running game might get a little boost here. Also, a guy that's really been coming into his own is right guard Wyatt Teller, who they traded for from the Buffalo Bills last year. He's out with a calf injury, so that's a significant injury after already having Nick Chubb on IR. He's not a part of this matchup. One of their key blockers, a la David DeCastro, if you watch a lot of their film, they do a lot of the trap pulling with Wyatt Teller, was one of their big guys that they always followed behind because of that mobility to the second level. So that's a devastating injury to that running front that they're already losing out with on Nick Chubb. So Wyatt Teller, he is out at right guard. By all accounts, it is Chris Hubbard, former Steelers right tackle, is going to be getting his first start at right guard in the NFL tomorrow, beside Jack Conklin there to take Wyatt Teller's place. Then we have a duo of safeties one was a free agent signing, Carl Joseph, with a hamstring injury. He's out this week. He's been a high percentage of snaps, been playing well for the Cleveland Browns. Also, Ronnie Harrison, a traded pick from Jacksonville, who is an athletic specimen, a big-time hitter. He's out with a concussion this week. So those are 4 key guys that have already been rolled out. And then they have a host of players that are questionable coming into game time that you got to keep an eye on. First up is Baker Mayfield. He has those chest rib injury that he's been dealing with. Not a good combination coming in with the pass rushing forceness that the Steelers have in that front seven. That's something definitely to keep an eye on. Just a reminder, Case Keenum is their quarterback, so their backup quarterback. And the other thing to take into account is their third string quarterback was none other than AAF, who was it? Orlando Apollo great. I almost butchered it there, Rob. Orlando Apollo great, Garrett Gilbert. He was actually sniped off their practice squad and had to go to Dallas this week because of Dak Prescott's injury. So they have a third quarterback that's not even able to suit up now, and Kyle Lauletta, who they signed to their practice squad, but due to COVID sanctions and everything that they have to go through with testing, he's not even able to suit up as a practice squad being elevated. So they're really down to only one quarterback. So keep your eyes on Baker Mayfield. If he gets walloped and he has to go out, that's a dangerous situation for Cleveland, and Case Keenum is their only backup on roster. So keep an eye on that. Also, both of their wide receivers, their key wide receivers are questionable. Jarvis Landry, he's been dealing with a hip and a rib injury. Keep an eye on that. Odell Beckham Jr. was sent home Thursday due to illness. He has not tested positive for the virus, but he has to, I believe, still be negative today. That's 3 straight days, and he'll be able to play as long as he's feeling well. By all accounts, it wasn't anything to do with the virus, but he was held out and sent home just by having, being, diligent about the cause here. So keep an eye on OBJ coming game time. By all accounts, I think he was cleared this morning, but not positive. But keep an eye that if he doesn't wake up sick on Sunday. Larry Ogunjobi, who's a very good run stuffer and can push the pocket as a defensive lineman in that conglomerate of defensive talent from Charlotte. He has an abdominal injury. He's also questionable. Olivier Vernon, one of their opposite pass rushers of Myles Garrett, he's questionable with a groin injury. And then finally, I believe his name is the Scottish Hammer, Jamie Gillian. He has a left groin injury. He's also questionable, their punter. He has a big-time leg, but if we can get him out, we might have the kicker kicking. So we'll see what happens here. They have a laundry list of players. We're lucky here in Pittsburgh. We only have 2 guys that are injured currently. Let's keep it that way, getting healthy into these key matchups. So, as we always like to get into here in our previews, going for 3 different stories we're keeping an eye on. I gotta talk about it. It's hard not to. What kind of environment are we going to have in this matchup? This is the first matchup, folks, since Myles Garrett took his helmet off and cracked Mason Rudolph over the head. Whether it was attempted murder, whatever you want to talk about, whether he said something, whether he didn't, this is the first matchup. So it's been a buzz in this town all this past week, especially on the radio stations and all the media outlets. What's going to happen with Myles Garrett? Mike Tomlin didn't want to talk about it. He didn't have the time of day. Cleveland, on the other hand, they're saying we're going to win this one for Myles. Everything that you hear coming out of Cleveland, this is like their Super Bowl week. So if they get up for this game, they're going to beat us, and it might be their biggest win all year. So we'll see. But I'm not so certain what kind of environment we're going to have. I just have this eerie feeling that we're going to see a matchup of the ilk of our old matchups here in the last maybe 5 to 6 years with the Cincinnati Bengals, where you knew it was going to be a slobber knocker, but you never knew if it was going to cross that line of dirty playing and the pettiness. So I'm worried that we're going to see this matchup take that right turn into the Cincinnati Bengal type, where Vontaze Burfict was making dirty hits and guys were retaliating against each other. I hope not. I want a clean ball game. I'm a Steeler fan that wants to see the Browns be good, because that's the real matchup and the real rivalry that's old school. Baltimore Ravens will always be there, but Cleveland and Pittsburgh has been a rivalry way, way back, even farther than any other one. So let's just play a clean game. Myles Garrett, just play your game. Hopefully, knock on wood that we don't even see Mason Rudolph with a helmet on. Big Ben's healthy for the entire rest of the season and next till he retires, and we don't have to see Mason Rudolph in a matchup with Myles Garrett. But let's just play a clean game. Let's not get petty with Bengals-esque type stuff in an AFC North matchup. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Cleveland, let bygones be bygones. Let's move forward. You got yourself a great player. We got great players too. Let's just play the game. Second story. Will the Steelers be able to stop the Browns' rushing attack? The Steelers have the number 1 ranked rushing defense. I said last week they had that 74-yard rush, but outside of that, I believe they only gave up like 86 yards. It's absolutely ridiculous what they've been able to do this year, especially with Javon Hargrave leaving. Tyson Alualu has been playing out of his mind at nose tackle. They're only averaging 64 yards a game as a run defense. And the Browns are one of the top rushing attacks with 188.4 yards per game. So it's like it's two Goliaths matching up against each other. But I already mentioned Wyatt Teller being out takes away one of their key aspects of short trap game that they love, especially with Kareem Hunt, who's more of a slasher type than he is a bulldozer in Nick Chubb. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on. I also got to throw out some stats here from Alex Kozora from Steelers Depot. Big thanks to you, buddy. And if you have not followed him yet on Twitter, you should if you're a Steeler fan, because he does great work with a lot of statistical work. And two of the things was when Tyson Alualu is on the field, I already talked about his game, the way he stepped it up, opposing offenses are only averaging 0.78 yards per carry. Let me say it again, 0.78 yards per carry. Not even a yard per carry when Alualu is on the field. So that's ridiculous. Also, the Steelers' base defense, the 3-4 style defense that we play, when they're run upon in a base defense, they're allowing only 1.4 yards per carry. 36% of opposing runs have gone for either 0 or a loss. That is ridiculous from our base defense. That's telling you these guys are coming to eat. So, and only a total of 27.8% of runs in totality are being successful against our front. So those are outstanding numbers. I hope we keep seeing that vicious front seven get after it in the run defense. And if so, Baker Mayfield's going to be in trouble because the game's going to be squarely on his shoulders. Our last storyline here to take a look at: which vaunted pass rusher will have a bigger impact on the game? Myles Garrett, who everybody's talking about as Defensive Player of the Year, or our own T.J. Watt? And just a couple stats from Nick Faribault from Sports Info Solutions that he has here, comparing the two, and I'm going to throw them at you here. Pressures: T.J. Watt has 19, Myles Garrett has 19. Quarterback hits: T.J. Watt has 15, Myles Garrett has 11. Sacks: Myles Garrett has 6, T.J. Watt has 4.5. Hurries: Garrett has 14, T.J. Watt has 13. Total quarterback knockdowns: T.J. Watt has 8, Myles Garrett has 6. Now, outlier to anybody that's saying Myles Garrett is the hands-down Defensive Player of the Year, check your Rolodex, because that's one less game that T.J. Watt has than Myles Garrett. That's how dominant our boy T.J. Watt has been this year. That's all I'm going to say about that. So, two epic pass rushers. It's going to be fun to be watching there. Now we're going to roll right in. Excuse me, I need to get a sip here. 3 matchups to be watching. We already just talked about them there. Myles Garrett versus Chuks Okorafor. Chuks Okorafor, by all accounts, is very acquainted himself well since taking over at the right tackle spot. I ultimately think he's our future left tackle. I don't think Villanueva will be back next year. This will be a matchup we hopefully see going forward for the next decade with the Steelers here, as Okorafor solidifies himself in the Steelers' offensive line room. But Chuks Okorafor has a key matchup with Myles Garrett in this first matchup with the Browns this year. The next matchup is Cam Hayward against old Steeler foe Chris Hubbard at right guard. And whether it's Cam Hayward or Stephon Tuitt, those guys are going to be giving him a beating at right guard. He's usually a tackle. We'll see how he adjusts inside than outside. And he's going to get his money's worth with those power rushers that we have inside there. And this is the biggest matchup, I think, in this entire game. Minkah Fitzpatrick. I know you've heard the entirety of the Steelers media and the Pittsburgh media saying he ain't having the games that he did last year. He hasn't been having the impact, blah, 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 against Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield is prone to get cocky and throw the ball down the field. In opportunities, he's in a double coverage and forcing the ball down the field. Minkah, you need to come up with a big play this week. I think you need at least an interception, maybe a forced fumble. We need your presence to be felt in this game, because if not, especially with our run defense, we need some playmaking from our secondary. So Minka versus Baker, that's where I'm going with my last matchup. 3 things that the Steelers need to get that W this week. We're going to go keep Baker Mayfield contained in the pocket. When you look at the totality of numbers, Baker Mayfield's accuracy numbers improve when he is on the move, especially out of the pocket to the right. So if we can't shut him down completely from being contained in the pocket, at least form a wall off the right-hand side, make him throw across his body going to the left. We got to keep him contained, and hopefully we can bring him to the ground and make that chest and rib injury, not feel so comfortable for the Cleveland Brown fans. Second thing to watch for the Steelers must do to get a W, we must score touchdowns when we're in the red zone, not field goals. Chase Claypool, I'm looking at you. Also Juju and Eric Ebron. You 3 need to be red zone targets bringing in those passes, because we already talked about our rushing attack hasn't been dynamic. Those are big targets and savvy route runners. We need to be getting those touchdowns, not field goals. 3, and this is just because he was been a bomb last week, keep feeding Mapletron, none other than Chase Claypool. I hope you at least get 1 touchdown this week and keep putting up those stats, big man. It's impressive to see your rapport with Big Ben. Keep pouring it in there. So, my prediction. This is an AFC North matchup. It always seems to come down to almost a field goal. It's never double digits. We never blow anybody out in the AFC North. I'm going with the Pittsburgh Steelers, being that they're at home, 28. Cleveland Browns, 24. I think we win on a late pick 6. Or something of that ilk, where an interception or a turnover sets us up for our final score to defeat the Cleveland Browns. But it will be a tough-fought game by both teams, and it will be hopefully a clean game more than anything. So Steelers 28, Cleveland Browns 24 is my prediction. I'm going to get ready to wrap up this entire sermon here. I do have one more thing I'd like to request for anybody listening to this. If you're a Steeler fan, everybody knows the name Tunch Ilkin. It was broke. I forgot to talk about it last week whenever I recorded. He's been really one of the guys, I don't want to say I idolized, but I always looked up to in his career. He always did things the right way. He's a Christian-based man that really looks out for the people more than the game. He cares about people. But Tunch Ilkin was diagnosed with ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. He said he's going to fight it with everything he's got, and I know Tunch, he's always done that since he's played for the Steelers. He's one of the radio voices of the Steeler network. But prayers off to you, big man. You'll be in my prayers every night. Hoping you best wishes and God's healing hand to be placed down upon you. And everybody that's listening here will be praying with you at the Steel City Sermon and Blitzalytics Nation, that we'll be looking out for your behalf. And if there's anything we can do for you, don't be afraid to reach out, Tunch. And I just want to throw that out there to any of the folks here at Steeler Nation. Finally, if you have yet to get it, we already said Chase Claypool was our number 1 ranked guy. I wrote up the Steelers. I know this. Chase Claypool, if you have yet to get the Prospect Encyclopedia, go hit the link here in the description of this episode. You will not be disappointed with all these young players that you see getting big snap counts this year. You're going to know who they are. You're going to know who you need to pick up on your waiver wire in fantasy football. Go out and get that. You can either get the $35 hard copy like I just showed you there, get the PDF, I believe it's $15. Outstanding stuff. Or if you don't want to spend the $15, go spend $5 for the team PDF of the team you're playing that week, or your own team. You're not going to be disappointed with it. So go get your Prospect Encyclopedia. You'll definitely not be sorry. If you have questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to hit me up for, the show's Twitter is at Steel City Sermon. My own Twitter is at Preacher Boy Roy. If there's anything I could ever do to help you out or just talk some Steeler stuff, hit me up. I always liked ending my show with stay humble, be a blessing, and we'll see you later, Steeler Nation.
Pittsburgh Steelers.
Pittsburgh do this all the time. I've been playing them for 13 years. When you avoid the middle, they go into the middle. It's never changed.
Black and yellow, black and yellow, black and yellow, black and yellow, black and yellow. fear for my life from the long arm of the law.